Well, hello again everyone. A question I have been asked quite a lot lately is, Alex, how do you always book such nice CLs and CSs, the Caravan and Motorhome Club certified locations and Camping and Caravanning Club certified sites? So I thought I'd make a little video going through the steps that I take when I'm selecting a CL or a CS for us to take a trip to. Now, the first thing to consider really is the purpose of your trip. Are you just going to have a really nice, quiet, relaxing time? Is there some sort of event that you are attending? Is it a meet-up with friends? We often book sites to do particular activities like kayaking, hill walking, and sometimes some mine exploring or caving. So these things have to be taken into account when you're selecting the site. Now, surprisingly, one of the hardest things to do is to arrange a little meet-up with 2 or 3 vans, because often the owners of CLs and CSs are a little bit wary about large groups turning up for perhaps obvious reasons. So it's always good perhaps to ring and actually speak to people rather than send an email on those occasions, because yeah, you need to satisfy people that you're just a group of friends meeting up and nothing untoward is going to happen. So having decided what you want to get out of your stay on a CL or CS, the next thing to consider really is how far you're prepared to travel. Lots of our trips are weekend trips, so naturally there is often a bit of a limit in the travel time we want to spend getting there and back. And this, of course, is why staying on a CL or a CS can open up a bit more opportunities to you for a weekend if you're a working person, because if you can't book Friday or Friday afternoon off work, then you're limited to the distance you can travel to get to a club site before they close the gates and the office on you, and you're in a late night arrivals waiting area, which always seems to me like a waste of a booking night, because, you know, on a weekend you're only booking 2 nights probably, and if you spend one of them in a late night arrivals area, then, you know, that's half of your holiday that you've spent basically in a car park and not on the nice site that you hope to be on. So with a CL and a CS, often it's possible to arrive much later. They're often just fields. You can let yourself in, pitch yourself up. It's better, of course, not to arrive really late, because you do risk disturbing other people on the site, but up until 10 o'clock at night I think you shouldn't really have too many problems. And yeah, that does open up a lot more opportunities in terms of travel distance over a weekend. Another consideration is what forms of transport are going to be available to you once you're pitched up on your CL or CS. Are you perhaps prepared to unpitch your van and drive it to wherever you want to go? If you're in a caravan, of course, that's less of an issue. We used to carry e-bikes with us. We haven't quite sorted that out in this new van yet, but we plan to. So e-bikes are definitely a good option, because they open up a bigger range than walking to different places, or even ordinary pedal cycling to different places. So that's always a good option. Often you can book sites within walking distance, perhaps where you want to go. Some people will take a tow car. And of course, public transport is an option. We have specifically booked sites near bus routes where we want to go, perhaps into a local town. We did that a little while ago when we visited Ludlow. We were a little bit out of town, but there's a bus stop right outside the site, and we were very easily able to go backwards and forwards. I think we did that as well with Hereford, which also worked very, very well. But of course, you've got to check all that out before you book the site, because once you get there and you find it's in the middle of nowhere, and you don't really want to unpitch your van, and it's too far to walk, there's no cycle paths near a busy main road, all these sort of things can catch you out and make your stay a bit less enjoyable than it might otherwise have been. So having thought about all that, you've probably now got a pretty good idea of the sort of location that you want to book. So now really you need to consider what sort of facilities you need on the site. The first thing really to consider is the season that you're going and whether or not you think that you'll need a hard standing pitch or not, because that will narrow down your options. We're usually okay on grass for most of the year really, but in the wettest months of the winter I do prefer to be on hard standing, because motorhomes aren't that great on wet grass or soggy, sort of boggy, sinking ground. You can survive. There are ways and things that you can carry and ways of getting yourself unstuck, but it's easier perhaps in the depths of winter to book a site with some hard standing pitches if you're in a motorhome. Do you want electric hookup? Again, that will limit your choice, although a lot more CLs and CSs do have power on them nowadays, but we don't tend to worry about that too much because we can be totally self-sufficient without electric hookup, certainly for a weekend, without too many problems. But if you don't have a great deal of battery capacity, perhaps no solar, something like that, or you use a lot of power. Some people have medical devices like CPAP machines and things which they have to run on 240 volts, so they do look for sites with electric hookup. I've heard that quite a few times. So you do have to consider these things, but if you can survive without electric hookup, it does open up a lot more possibilities for you. Do you need toilets and showers to be provided? That is a consideration. In our old van, before I refitted the shower to it, I did used to look for CLs and CSs that had a little facilities provision, perhaps a shower or a toilet area, because our facilities on board were usable but not great. So that could be a consideration for you. Perhaps you have just a small camper van and you really prefer to look for sites with a small facilities block. There are more and more CLs and CSs that have toilets and showers on them, but again that will limit the range that you can choose from a little bit if you do need that. We don't tend to worry these days. Nikki does prefer much more to use the facilities in the van, and I'm quite happy to do so. So yeah, that's not usually too much for consideration for us. Now, another very important one if you have a dog is to consider whether the CL and CS you're booking allows dogs. They're usually pretty good at putting on the website or in the book if they don't allow dogs, but you do have to watch out for that. You could get caught out if you just assume you can take a dog, and sometimes places like working farms they don't allow dogs. It's quite rare, but I have seen a few sites that don't allow dogs, so just watch out for that when you're choosing your CL and CS. When we arrange perhaps trips with other people who do have dogs, I do have to watch out for that. But of course we don't have a dog ourselves, so if we're just booking for ourselves, that's not usually a consideration for us. And similarly, of course, you have to watch out for adult only CLs and CSs. Now, the majority of the time it is just myself and Nikki travelling, so we don't have to worry about it too much, but we do have Mia with us sometimes. So then I have to watch out that I'm not booking an adults only CL and CS, because there are, or it seems like there are, an increasing number of these. So watch out for that, because if you're on a family weekend, obviously you don't want to arrive and find that you've booked yourself onto an adult only CL and CS. Haven't heard of that happening. I haven't had any sort of stories of people doing that, but I imagine it would be quite easy to do. I've caught myself a couple of times thinking, oh, that looks good, we could go there and perhaps take Mia, and then I read through and realise that it is an adult only site. So that's definitely one to watch out for. Another thing is the maximum outfit size. Sometimes sites will state a maximum outfit length, and of course you have to be very wary of that if you've got a larger motorhome or perhaps a very long caravan. I have just recently looked at a CL that I was interested in booking for a weekend with us in the motorhome and another couple in a caravan, and I realised the site actually said they didn't allow caravans, which is not one I've seen before, but yeah, it was a motorhome only CL. So yeah, there are all these restrictions that you do have to watch out for. So now you've got yourself a list, either on paper or in your head, of what you want from the location and what you want from the CL and CS itself in terms of facilities. So now you can have a look. I tend to use the websites either on the mobile or on my laptop. You can use the book and you can use the little map that you get as well, certainly from the Caravan and Motorhome Club. But that doesn't give you the sort of depth of information that the website does. So I always prefer to look at the individual sort of websites for the clubs. Now, both those websites allow you to filter by quite a lot of criteria. They're a little bit idiosyncratic in the ways that they do it. You have to sort of get used to each site and work out how you filter out these things. And the easiest thing, they'll give you a map view or they'll give you a list view. So I tend to look at the map view and the list view. So I'll look at the map and then I'll pick out perhaps ones that I think are good. But if that doesn't work out for me, I will go to the list view instead. And on the list view, you do get the little icons which tell you various things about the electric hookup, whether it's near a beach, all this sort of thing. So you've now got yourself really a short list of sites. You've filtered out those criteria and you've narrowed down an area. So you've now got a list you can look through and try and pick one. So often at this stage, daft as it sounds, I'll just start looking at the names of the sites that most appeal to me. Now that's not very scientific at all, but it's a starting point. And then once I open them up and have a little look, quite often they'll have photographs of the site. Some of them don't, and that doesn't tend to worry me too much if they don't, because I have other ways of assessing if I think I'll like the site. I'll look at the reviews. Now, the reviews can be a little bit subjective. You have to take the reviews with a bit of a pinch of salt. I don't really mind if the site hasn't got 5-star reviews across the board. There are some people who have different views and different criteria to myself, and you know, that's okay, that's fine. So things like busy working farms, tractors going past, farm animals making a noise, none of that really tends to worry me. Road noise, you know, unless I can see on the map that it's right next to a motorway or something, I tend to take road noise with a little bit of a pinch of salt. But, you know, some people do worry a little bit more about that. One thing that really does tend to write a site off for me is if I see that people in the reviews have mentioned that there's sort of dogs running free and dog mess on the site, because yeah, I don't know, that doesn't really appeal, does it? And you do see that quite a few times, actually. I guess that goes along with being a working farm, and some farm dogs perhaps better behaved than others, but that's just me. I don't really that kind of puts me off if I see that. But on the other hand, you know, dogs barking and things like that, you do see that in reviews. Oh, it's on a farm and the dogs were barking all night and that sort of thing. I tend to take that with a little bit of a pinch of salt as well, because you know, that comes under the sort of farm animals heading. So I don't mind negative reviews, but I do look at why they're there. Positive reviews are always good. If you do see one that's 5 stars across the board, then they are generally nice sites. But some of the ones I've really enjoyed staying at have had quite bad reviews, but for reasons that I don't really care about. And another thing to watch out for is sites with no reviews at all. Now that is often quite a good sign, because I think often people will only review things where they found something to complain about. And sometimes there's no reviews because it's a relatively new CL or CS. And again, that tends to mean that the people doing it are quite into it. They've only recently opened it. They've made quite a lot of effort. So the fact that there's no reviews at all doesn't put me off really either. Another thing I often see in negative reviews is that people don't like the fact that they haven't been welcomed to the site and they haven't met the owner. Yeah, they've had the whole weekend, and at the end of it they've still not seen anyone, and they have to put some money in an envelope and put it through a farmhouse door or something. Now, that also doesn't bother me at all. In fact, that's one of the big advantages, I think, of staying on a CL and CS. Not that we're particularly antisocial and we don't like to meet the owner. It's very nice to meet the owner if they choose to come round and say hello, but rather like the fact that there's often no check-in time and you can come and go as you please. It's just more free and easy, no one bothers you. Very typical of staying on a CL and CS is that you don't really see much of the people that own it. In fact, I've stayed on a CL where the owners weren't even there. They'd gone on holiday, but they still said, well, you can stay on the CL, just put some money in an envelope through the door, and that's that. So yeah, that's the ultimate really in not meeting the owner. They weren't even in the country. So yeah, that really doesn't worry me at all if people have put that they haven't met the owners. Now, one of the final, but perhaps the most important things that I do is that I go to one of the mapping sites. I tend to prefer streetmap.co.uk because it has ordnance survey level mapping on it, 1 to 25,000 and 1 to 50,000. And I'll look up the postcode of the site. And what that'll tell me is it'll give me a good feel for the location of the site and what's around it. I'm very used to reading ordnance survey maps, and I can get a good idea of the sort of atmosphere and the topography of the area. Is it near a wood? Are there lots of footpaths that we could potentially walk around? Is it near the beach? How close it is to the beach? Can we walk to the beach? Can we cycle to the beach? Is there a pub nearby? Is there a village nearby? Is that easy to get to, or will we have to walk along the main road or cycle along the main road? All these things, looking at the map can tell you, and that's where I really tend to filter things out. And I'll pick sites that think, well, that looks really good at location on the map, or well, that doesn't look so great. And you can also see like things like, well, is it right next to the sewage works? Is it in the middle of an industrial estate? Things like that. I have stayed on a CS which was in the middle of an industrial estate, and that was actually very nice. So that doesn't necessarily put me off. But you're prepared for it. You know what you're getting into when you make the booking. So I do find that looking at the ordnance survey map for the area is a big important step in selecting the site. Now, you could use Google Earth. I prefer not to use Google Earth. I don't find it that helpful, simply because you're looking from above, and I don't think you really get a good feel from aerial photography as you do from mapping, weirdly. You'd think it would be better because it's an actual photograph of what's there, but often I mean, you don't look from several thousand feet up vertically down when you're on site, so you get a very different viewpoint when you're on site, and I find it easier to visualize what that might be like from looking at a map than looking at aerial photography. Could use Street View as well. I mean, obviously that can help if you're particularly worried about the approach to a site. That doesn't tend to worry me too much. I don't tend to bother with Street View. Again, it gives you a bit of a skewed opinion, in my view, of the location. You've only got that view of being on a road. You can't see what the countryside around is like, mostly from Street View, so I don't really tend to use that either. It's the Ordnance Survey mapping which really tells you, if you're used to reading maps, what the area is like. So there you go, that's really all the thoughts that I put into selecting a CL or a CS, and yeah, it's a great way to have a more economical weekend, a more free weekend, I think. Less rules and regulations, less time restrictions and things. I mean, mostly on CLs on a Sunday, unless it's busy, Nobody really cares if you're off by 12. Sometimes they do. You've got to check that out for yourself, of course, but I've had much more luck having late departures from a CL or a CS than I have done on a campsite. Of course, it is always polite to ask the owners, so don't just assume you can stay late. But I think you'll much more likely to get a yes on a CL or a CS. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed this video, and let me know if it's helped you in any way in looking at booking CLs and CSs. And again, yeah, let me know if you've stayed on a really good CL and CS.